Hello and welcome to my Yugioh channel. Today we're going to be looking at the archetype for the fables, and this is the Terminal World 2 Advanced Review. The fabled Behemoth is a level 2 light attribute beast type tuner effect monster. It has 1000 attack and 600 defense. You can only use the first and second effects of this card's name each once per turn. 1. If this card is in your hand, you can discard 2 or more fabled monsters, including this card, and if you do, special summon 1 fabled synchro monster from your extra deck whose total levels equals the discarded monster's total original levels. This is treated as a synchro summon. 2. If the card is sent from your hand to the graveyard while this card is in your graveyard, you can banish this card, special summon 1 fabled monster from your hand. The fabled monsters have a number of different tuner monsters, and that's pretty much to go into your synchro plays. They have some of them which have level manipulation, so that being the fabled raven. They have some that are recursions, but currently, as of date, I don't think they have had any of those that synchro summon from the field and using materials from the hand, so this is an exception to the rule. This is very much something, there's a couple of other cards that do this. There's like a psychic Elekid type monster that was featured in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D somewhere, and that pretty much has that type of effect, but the monster that tends to be brought out through that can no longer use its effect, so that's quite a downside. This, by discarding 2 cards or more, including this, lets you just special summon a fabled synchro monster and it gets treated as that synchro monster. You can use this card and one other card, or you can choose to use potentially more fabled monsters to bulk out into your higher level synchro plays, but generally the synchro monsters need an upgrade. Most of them rely on letting you draw or recover into additional cards rather than let you do much of anything else, and until you really address that matter, this isn't so great of an effect. It does reduce the summoning conditions, as you don't need to have other monsters on your field in order for you to bring out those synchro monsters, so it at least lessens the burden in that respect. The second ability, if this card is sent from the field, from your hand to the graveyard, while this card is in your graveyard, just by banishing this card, you're able to special summon any fabled monster from your hand, so it does have an additional special summon effect within it. And since the fabled archetype works with monsters and cards that have to be discarded to bring out other cards, this will happen multiple times within any turn. Only trouble with this is it's banished, so unless you have specific banish recovery, that will be a significant weakness. It says here in the notes that this card is named after Behemoth, a legendary primordial monster described in the Book of Job. Its artwork is based on the Final Fantasy series depiction of the monster, so that's kind of where its lore comes from. This new card is fabled Gamagen. It's a level 4 light attribute fiend type synchro tuner effect monster. It's got 2000 attack points and 0 defense, and the materials are a fabled tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner monsters. You can only use the first and third effects of this card's name each once per turn. 1. If this card is synchro summoned, you can special summon 1 fabled monster from your hand or deck. 2. Your opponent cannot target other fabled synchro monsters you control with card effects. And 3. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can draw cards equal to the number of fabled synchro monsters you control, then discard 1 card. This is a synchro tuner. That is a problem, as that often means that somewhere within the deck you're going to have a monster that needs a synchro tuner in order to bring it out. I'm guessing there's going to be a level 12 somewhere, and that's going to be a significant problem, as it'll almost become its own synchro spam style of deck, which is not the direction I hope this archetype is kind of leaning towards. I'd rather it have more disruptions within it and keep within the basis of kind of having its own style rather than just become generic synchro spam deck, which is often what you now see with the Tech Genus and more so the Stardust, and even Red Dragon Archfiend has that as part of its kind of downside of using it. It needs a fabled tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner monsters, so it does need a specific fabled monster, and so even if you were to use this in other types of decks, it is pretty much likened for the fabled archetype. Has 2000 attack points, which is fine for a level 4 monster, but it has 0 defense points, so I can also justify why it's not higher than a level 4. First ability, as soon as this card is synchro summoned, you can instantly special summon a fabled monster either from the hand or the deck. That's perfect because you have pretty much all the choices you need. You can either choose from the hand or anything from the deck, so that's perfect. Second ability forces your opponent to target this card with card effects before they can go after any of your other fabled synchro monsters. So it provides itself as a kind of shield towards any of your other ones which are more disruptive. And the third ability, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can draw cards equal to the number of fabled synchro monsters you control, then discard one card. The more of these fabled synchro monsters you have on the field, the more cards you can draw. But the discard is also useful, as most of those cards will then have their own effects after being discarded. I'd say that when this card is sent to the graveyard, this effect instantly triggers, so it can also be used when it's been used as part of the synchro summon for one of your other synchro monsters. The note here says this card is named after demon Gamagin, referenced in the Lesser Key of Solomon and the Pseudo-Monarcharia Daemonum. It is a Marquis of Hell who looks like a horse, but transforms into a horse-voiced man, who knows the depths of liberal arts and gives accounts of those who have died in sins, and can force souls who drowned into airy bodies to answer questions. Interesting subtext to how the card likes to work, but that's fine, as I like the kind of background towards it. The next card is the Fabled Swarm Leversible, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a level 10 light attribute fiend type synchro effect monster. It has 3050 attack and 1950 defense. The materials are a tuner plus one or more non-tuner monsters. And you can use the second effect of this card's name once per turn. Once per turn during the main phase as a quick effect, you can tribute any number of fabled monsters, and if you do, take control of that many face-up monsters your opponent controls, but their effects are negated. 2. If this card is in your graveyard, you can target one other fabled card in your graveyard, return this card to the extra deck, and if you do, add that target to your hand. The interesting part of this is I have recently covered the fabled archetype in review, so that's just my general review, and you can check that out in the description if you feel like. And the Leviathan has exactly 3000 attack points and 2000 defense points. The difference between this and that is it's slightly more offensive than it is defensive. It's taken 50 of those defense points and added those to its attack points, and the combined total is still the same. Materials are generic, so it can be run in multiple types of decks. So long as you've got tuners and non-tuners, you can pretty much make this card, but it's designed for Fables as its effects only work within the Fable archetype. First ability can be used during the main phase, either during yours or your opponent's turn, as it is a quick effect. By attributing any number of fabled monsters, you can take control of that many face-up monsters your opponent controls, but their effects are negated. This is a permanent taking your opponent's cards, which is perfect, as firstly what it does is it allows you to pretty much get rid of any of the fabled monsters you don't need for that time. You take your opponent's monsters before they can do anything with those cards. So if they want to extend into any sort of combos and you know how that deck likes to work, you can disrupt them, and they'll often have to go up to different options, and they may end up with a less optimum start of board. And even though their effects are negated, provided you have those monsters on the field, you're most likely going to be able to use them as part of a synchro play into one of your other fabled synchro monsters or into any of your other cards, and there isn't any other restrictions to it. And the nice thing as well is this is not a, lifetime once per duel effect. It can be used each and every turn. So long as you can keep bringing out your fabled monsters, you can keep using those disruptions. It's also very similar to one of the Gimmick Puppet Xyz monsters, the rank 4, as that's got the effect of detaching 2 materials. It can take 2 of your opponent's monsters, they get brought over to your side. The downside of them is that they are returned at the end phase, so you do need to use them. Otherwise, your opponent's just getting those cards and you've brought out a monster for no reason. And by attributing that Xyz monster, you adapt the levels of those monsters your opponent controls, and they become level 8. So you can bring out either your number 15, your number 40, or if you've got another level 8 monster on your field already, you're in number for the Gimmick Puppet of Leo. So there is that flexibility towards it, but this is just a much better effect. Second ability, provided this card is in the graveyard, by targeting another Fable card in your graveyard, this gets returned to the extra deck, so you don't have to run other forms of recovery, and you get to recover that card. It does provide a lot of flexibility. It says here that they're pretty sure this is a portmanteau of Leviathan. So again, the Leviathan is the one I was telling you about before that has the slight difference in attack and defense points. The primordial Chaos Camp Serpent of Abrahamic lore that predates the metamorphosis of the Jewish faith into its from post the Babylonian conquest, where it originally more heavily resembled the Marduk vs. Tiamat myth. Also Beelzebub, Lord of Highest Place, the full title of the Canaanite deity Baal that got morphed into Zebub, Lord of the Flies, later twisted into Beelzebub, another name for Satan or Lucifer. or another demon depending on the Christian author's fanfic of the week. They're talking about works like Paradise Lost, Dante's Inferno, or demonic compendiums, not the Bible itself. Also, verse is the Japanese term for the Steel Swarm and Evil Swarm themes, and the Steel Swarm can be argued to be giant monstrous demonic flies and beetles, and Beelzebub is the Lord of the Flies, so that's where the two kind of archetypes are linking towards each other. Fabled Realm Resurrection is a continuous spell card. You can only activate one card with this card's name per turn. When this card resolves, you can set one Fabled Spell Trap card from your deck except Fabled Realm Resurrection. 2. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects when your Fabled monster is synchro summoned. And 3. Once per turn, you can discard one Fabled card and activate one of these effects. Either draw a card or you get to special summon a Fabled monster from your graveyard or banishment. This being a continuous spell card means it can be used each and every turn. As soon as it's activated, you can set a Fabled Spell Trap card from your deck except a copy of itself. I think the only one it has, there's a trap card which has the ability to destroy one of your opponent's cards, but it requires you to destroy one of yours and also a discard cost, so there's quite a limitation to it. Second ability, provided your opponent cannot activate a cards or effects when your fabled monster is synchro summoned. This means that at least you are able to perform the synchro summon rather than it be negated. And the third ability, just by discarding a fable card, you can either choose to draw a card or you can special summon a fabled monster from your graveyard or banishment. This is the way of recovering your cards that happen to be either in those positions without having to run additional forms of support. The discard is good as the fabled monsters are very much on being discarded, and even if you're just deciding to draw into any random card, you also have that flexibility. The notes do cover a lot of the other Fable cards, but I already have those kind of within my explanations, and if further wished for, I will also put those probably in shorts just to explain what those cards are. Perfectly fine as a deck, but I am still waiting to see any proper forms of disruption. Currently, the only one that really disrupts anything is the brand new higher boss synchro monster. Again, I was thinking that we might get a rank 12 only because we've got a synchro tuner and that's typically theming. We haven't received all of the cards. That's the only thing I'm thinking of, that they're kind of waiting on one or two more of those cards before kind of announcing that. We're also missing two of the themes. We've got the Durex covered and we've got pretty much the most of the fables. We're missing the other two themings, and so they'll probably bring those out before they ever, come up with the other cards. I'd love for you to know what you guys think of these cards. Put those in the comments down below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and make sure to check out that other video which is just reviewing the Fabled archetype in full. Thank you.